At family dinner in our beach house in San Diego, my mother kicked me out in the cold rain when I was 18 and pregnant. My sister laughed at me for being pregnant without a husband. "You're a disgrace," my mother snarled, shoving me toward the door as rain pounded the windows. I stumbled out soaked and shivering with no place to go, clutching my belly where the life I never planned pulsed inside. 3 years later, when they tried to take my son away, my husband slammed the door and said, "You've lost that right." But that confrontation unleashed a storm worse than the rain. Accusations flew, threats escalated, and suddenly he was clutching his chest on the floor. The paramedics rushed him to the hospital, machines beeping as doctors fought to save him. I became his medical proxy, holding documents that shook in my hands, while my little boy tugged at my sleeve, asking why Daddy wouldn't wake up. Social workers swarmed, lawyers stepped in, and the lies spread like wildfire on social media. Tests confirmed the worst, forcing a decision that tore me apart. We said goodbye amid beeps and tubes, then faced the fallout, selling the house, starting over in a cramped apartment. But through it all, I learned family isn't blood. It's who fights for you. If you got this far, you must have some free time. Hit subscribe and like for more raw family dramas that hit home. The next morning, I woke up in Steve Gonzalez's spare room in his beach house overlooking the San Diego coast. My clothes were still damp from the rain, and my stomach churned with a mix of hunger and fear. He knocked softly before entering with a tray of tea and toast, his voice calm, as he said he'd canceled his shift at the cafe to help me figure things out. I broke down then, spilling everything about the bad situation with that older guy, and how my family saw it as my shame. Steve didn't judge, he just listened, then drove me to a clinic for a checkup where the doctor confirmed I was about 12 weeks along. From there, we fell into a rhythm that felt strangely normal. Steve set me up in the guest room filled with surfboards and old photo albums, and he came to every appointment holding my hand when the nausea hit hard. The staff assumed he was my dad at first, and we let it slide because it felt safer that way. He'd talk about his late wife, Susan Reed, who'd passed from cancer 5 years earlier after they'd tried for kids without luck. "This could be our fresh start," he said one night while we sat on the porch, listening to the waves crash, his hand gently on my swelling belly. I started believing maybe I could love this baby despite how it started. As months passed, my belly grew, and so did my trust in him. I helped out at his cafe near the beach, grading customer feedback or organizing supplies, while he managed the place. We turned the office into a nursery with cribs and toys from thrift shops, and he painted the walls a soft blue, like the ocean outside. Labor came fierce after 19 hours in the hospital, me screaming for a mom who wasn't there. Steve stayed the whole time, wiping my forehead and whispering encouragement. When Bobby Gonzalez finally arrived, Steve cut the cord and held him first after me, tears in his eyes as Bobby's tiny fist grabbed his finger. "Can he call you Grandpa?" I asked through exhaustion, and Steve nodded, cradling him like his own. We brought Bobby home to the beach house where the sound of waves lulled him to sleep. Steve taught him Spanish lullabies from his family roots, and I made funny faces to make him giggle. Bobby's first steps were toward Steve's outstretched arms on the sandy deck, grabbing at his sunglasses. He said, "Mama" to me, and "Papa" to Steve, soon after shifting from Grandpa as our bond deepened. We got married quietly at City Hall, a year in making it official what we'd built together, a family chosen every day amid the salt air and sunsets. Life settled into something beautiful I never expected. I'd do online classes while Bobby napped, and Steve would bring home fresh coffee beans to grind. The dogs, 2 rescues he'd adopted after Susan, curled around Bobby's playmat, sensing his every need. We'd walk the beach at dusk, Bobby toddling between us, collecting shells. For the first time, I felt safe, like the rain that night had washed away the old shame. But deep down, I knew storms could return. 3 years later, everything felt steady in our beach house routine, until one afternoon when my phone buzzed with a notification from a family group chat I hadn't left. My cousin Johnny Thompson had posted a photo of me and Bobby playing on the San Diego shore, tagging everyone without asking, captioning it, "Something innocent about family fun." But it lit a fuse within hours. There was a knock at the door, and through the window I saw my mother Jenna Ramirez and my sister Whitney Ramirez standing on the porch. Their faces tight with that old judgment. I froze, heart pounding like the waves during a storm, but Steve Gonzalez answered before I could. Jenna pushed forward, her voice sharp as she demanded to see her grandson, claiming Grandma deserved to meet him before it was too late. Some story about her health fading from the shame I'd caused. Whitney smirked behind her arms crossed, adding that I'd run off like a fool, and now owed them for the embarrassment. "He's our blood," Jenna insisted, trying to peer inside where Bobby was napping on the couch with the dogs curled nearby. Steve stepped between them and us, his frame blocking the doorway, and told them to back off or leave. When Jenna started yelling that Steve was just some opportunist who'd taken advantage of a vulnerable girl, Whitney chimed in with accusations that he'd manipulated me into this fake family. I wanted to shrink away, but Steve's voice boomed steady. He slammed the door in their faces and said, "You've lost that right." Bobby woke up crying from the noise clinging to my legs as the shouting continued outside. Steve grabbed his phone and called the police right then, reporting harassment and mentioning the abandonment from 3 years back when they'd kicked me out pregnant. The officers arrived quickly. San Diego PD responds fast to domestic calls near the beach areas and took statements on the porch while I held Bobby inside, stroking his hair to calm him. Jenna ranted about her rights as a grandmother, but the cops noted the history, warning her and Whitney to stay away or face charges. Steve stood firm beside me when they questioned us, explaining how he'd built this life with us, legally no coercion involved. As they drove off, Jenna's face twisted red with rage, pointing at Steve and screaming he'd regret interfering with her family. Whitney laughed bitterly, calling him a creep, preying on lost girls, promising to make sure everyone knew. Inside, my hands shook as I rocked Bobby back to sleep. He kept asking why those angry ladies were yelling at Papa. Steve hugged us both, his usual calm, cracked just a bit, but he assured me we'd handle it together. That night, as waves crashed below, I couldn't shake the dread. Their words echoed like the rain from that first storm, twisting our peace into something fragile. Steve suggested we document everything in case they escalated, and I agreed, pulling out a notebook to jot notes while he emailed a lawyer friend. Little did I know the real fallout was just starting. Jenna's threats weren't empty, and Whitney's social media posts would ignite the fire. But in that moment, with Bobby's soft breaths and Steve's arm around me, I clung to the family we'd chosen. That evening, Steve Gonzalez clutched his chest right there in the beach house living room, his face draining of color as he gasped my name. Jamie, like he had something urgent to say before collapsing to the floor. My heart stopped. I dropped to my knees beside him, yelling for him to hold on while dialing 911 with shaking hands. The paramedics arrived fast, their sirens cutting through the San Diego night, and they worked on him for what felt like forever. 30 minutes of chest compressions and defibrillator shocks before loading him into the ambulance. I followed in our car with Bobby strapped in the back, his little eyes wide and confused, asking why Papa was sleeping on the ground. At the hospital downtown, the ER lights buzzed harsh overhead as nurses hooked Steve up to machines that beeped steadily, pumping air into his lungs and monitoring his heart. Dr. Jimmy Reed came in soon after, his scrubs rumpled from a long shift, and explained that Steve's heart had stopped, from the stress likely triggered by the confrontation earlier, leaving his brain without oxygen too long. He showed me scans on a tablet, pointing out the dark areas where damage had set in, but said they'd run more tests tomorrow to confirm brain function. I nodded numbly, holding Bobby on my lap as he fidgeted with Steve's lifeless hand, puzzled why it wouldn't squeeze back, like in their morning games. The doctor mentioned Steve had named me his medical proxy last year after we married, paperwork I'd signed without much thought, assuming we'd have decades ahead. My fingers trembled as I gripped the forms, the words blurring about no extraordinary measures if recovery wasn't possible. Bobby started whining, then hungry and scared of the sterile smells, so a nurse brought crackers, but he refused to eat without seeing Papa. That's when Wanda Grant walked in her badge, identifying her as the hospital social worker carrying a thick folder and speaking in a soothing tone that eased my chest a fraction. She found us a quiet family room down the hall with toys for Bobby, where he stacked blocks while she explained proxy duties and handed me booklets on end-of-life care. Dr. Reed returned later to detail the heart failure more, how the blockage had starved his organs, and while they'd restarted the beat, the 40-minute gap meant potential severe brain injury. He stressed the ICU rules limited kids, but the staff bent them for Bobby, who cried whenever we tried leaving the room. Wanda offered to arrange a volunteer to watch him during key talks if needed, jotting her number on a card. That night, I sat in a stiff chair by Steve's bed, cradling Bobby as he dozed with his thumb in his mouth, the ocean breeze from home, now replaced by the hum of ventilators. Memories flooded back the first night Steve took me in after the rain, pouring herbal tea and letting me cry without questions, just repeating, "You're safe now," until I believed it. Now I whispered the same to his still form tube snaking everywhere, begging him not to leave us orphaned. My gut twisted, replaying Jenna's purple-faced rage and Whitney's sneering threats outside our door, their words about Steve being a manipulator echoing in my mind. Wanda noticed my uneven breathing and asked if there were safety issues. I told her about the visit and accusations, and she noted it immediately, promising to flag it in the system. By morning, Bobby's forehead felt hot during breakfast in the cafeteria, and he whimpered about his tummy hurting. The ICU nurse checked his temp 101 degrees, so we rushed to pediatrics downstairs, waiting 30 minutes before a doctor diagnosed a mild infection from the stress and germs. Bobby kept asking for Papa to kiss his head and chase the hurt away like always. We got meds and headed back upstairs, where Dr. Reed waited with preliminary results, his expression confirming my fears. No signs of brain activity yet, but more tests needed. Wanda joined us, scheduling a team meeting for tomorrow to discuss options, assuring me support no matter what. As Bobby tugged Steve's fingers again, I gripped his cold hand tighter, whispering please amid the machine whirs, the weight of it all pressing like the waves we'd once watched together. The next day, my phone exploded with alerts from old contacts I hadn't thought about since leaving home tag shares and vicious comments under Jenna Ramirez's post on the San Diego Locals Facebook group. She'd painted Steve Gonzalez as a sleaze who'd preyed on a desperate pregnant girl, flipping his rescue into something ugly and calculated. Whitney Ramirez jumped in the comments, accusing him of brainwashing me into his twisted setup, demanding authorities investigate the cafe manager who'd stolen our family. Strangers piled on. Some called for boycotts of his beachside spot. Others, who knew Steve from community events, pushed back, but the poison spread fast, twisting my gut like a riptide. I stared at the screen in the hospital hall, tears blurring the words, while Bobby yanked my sleeve, asking why Papa's room beeped so much, his fever down, but still clingy from the meds. Wanda Grant noticed my pale face and pulled me aside, her tone firm as she asked about the posts. I showed her, and she flagged it as harassment to bolster any case. Then the cafe's HR line rang, a rep sounding awkward, citing an anonymous tip about Steve's inappropriate involvement with a young staffer, meaning me. "We have to check every claim," she said, scheduling an interview, though her doubt leaked through. The accusations hit like breakers, crashing the shore. I couldn't let this bury Steve while he lay hooked to machines. Wanda connected me with legal aid, and by midday Joe Harlan showed up in a faded button-down handshake, solid eyes lined from cases like this. In a cramped meeting room, he broke down the proxy roll, honor Steve's wishes, not mine, flipping through the directive where he'd penned no heroics. If hope was gone, echoes of Susan Reed's suffering. When I spilled the online storm, Joe's jaw set. He leaned in, assuring Jenna and Whitney held no cards on Bobby after ditching me pregnant, their threats, building a clear harassment trail for a restraining order. He drafted forms on the spot as Bobby fiddled with his tie clip relief, cracking through my panic like sunlight after rain. I sobbed right there, Joe sliding tissues while Wanda steadied me. The papers were airtight, he said, witnessed and stamped. Estate headaches could wait. In the ICU, Dr. Jimmy Reed tuned monitors when I pushed for another brain scan. He booked it for tomorrow, with the top specialist nodding at my resolve in a mess too heavy for someone barely 21. Valerie Ellis, the volunteer with her kind vest, whisked Bobby to the play zone so I could breathe. He went willingly, truck in hand, chattering about towers. That afternoon, Joe urged a quick run to the beach house for docs before escalation. The drive twisted my insides without Steve spotting seals from the window like always with Bobby. Salt air greeted us inside his mug by schedules as if he'd return any minute. Bobby dove into toys while Joe led me to the office binder, policies, accounts, deed, all labeled neatly. Tucked back my envelope, Steve's letter spilling how rescuing me reignited his world post-Susan pride in our family. His deepest gift, trusting me with Bobby forever. I crumpled reading it, sobs raw on the floor. Joe paused nearby, then decoded the debts, a refinanced mortgage for Susan's care bills he'd hidden to protect us. Probate loomed months out, sale likely to settle it. Evening back at the hospital, Dr. Reed delivered the redo eval from while I'd handled Bobby's fever. His grave look said enough: massive oxygen-deprived damage, no brainwaves beyond machine tricks. iPad scans showed voids where life once sparked. Recovery, impossible, brainstem on autopilot. Wanda hovered as the truth slammed home, setting a team huddle tomorrow for paths forward. Her promise of backup, the only anchor in the chaos. After the tests, I knew what had to be done. Steve Gonzalez's directive stared back, clear. No machines, if no real chance, a echo of Susan Reed's drawn-out end he never wanted repeated. Dr. Jimmy Reed proposed easing sedation for a final response check tomorrow, cautioning low odds from the scans. I nodded fast, craving that last confirmation even as fear gripped tight. Bobby Gonzalez zoomed his truck along the bedrail, humming Steve's wave song, blind to the pallid face amid tubes. Night dragged brutal. Bobby's nightmares flared him, thrashing, hot, sobbing for Papa to banish monsters, thumbs sucked raw like infancy. I rocked him in the cot, murmuring Steve's love lingered even asleep, but Bobby's instincts screamed wrong, his cries piercing. Wanda Grant dropped grief booklets affirming the pre-loss stab as valid coaching box breaths in 4, hold out 4 to blunt the edges. She validated the fury and overwhelm, okay to crave handover of this weight. Dawn hit relentless, meds tapered as Dr. Reed's team watched monitors. Bobby perched on my knee, vrooming his toy while they voiced Steve's name, flashed lights, pinched nails for pain. Eyes blank, hand-slack pupils fixed, no twitch. 20 minutes later, Dr. Reed's shoulder pat sealed it, no function beyond machine props. Bobby piped up if Papa was mended. I swallowed tears, saying docs gave all. Wanda ushered a child specialist using Doll's Papa's body, 2 broken machines aiding breath, but no wake-up. Bobby placed Doll hands together, nodding, yet eyed the door like Steve might appear. Afternoon, a counselor joined bedside, owning the nightmare for my age, her methods easing anxiety surges. Mid-talk. My phone buzzed, unknown mother's shaky voice claiming post rumors spurred her, begging a secret park meet with Bobby, apologies tangled in blame shifts. Her plea for stealth, fearing Jenna's wrath, rang weak. I shut it down, no contact ever, their venom sealed it. She wept. I blocked severing final. The care huddle packed the room, docs, nurses, ethics pro, dissecting life quality and directive respect. She recited Steve's note on dodging Susan's machine hellcasting release as honor. Sobs choked me by close, but path cleared, sustaining betrayed him. Dr. Reed set withdrawal tomorrow, meds for ease. We readied the space. Steve's surf track, soft Bobby's sketches taped round our stick crew riding waves. Nurses aided handprints, Bobby smushing his palm to Steve's in color. Bobby slumbered in the chair as I filmed for him, later voice fracturing on Steve's story, the savior choosing us over blood's discard songs taught stand against storms. 10 minutes of halts and tears, but vital for Bobby's future knowing. Dawn surged quick. Respiratory crew outlined as I clenched Steve's hand. Bobby hummed the lullaby, pecking fingers like ritual. Vent disconnect hushed odd room stilling as breaths shallowed over 15 minutes. I urged him to find Susan, gratitude spilling as Bobby waved farewell like daycare drop. Final exhale whispered gone. Nurse pulsed, check head shake timed it while unhooking. We stayed hour with the shell, Bobby cheek patting, pleading, eyes open till funeral folks came. Donation nixed by age and heart woes. Stung Steve deserved to aid post-life. Cafe crew set memorial 2 weeks on at the beachside joint, snaps from his shift's patrons recounting mentorships and sponsorships. Jenna and Whitney crashed despite alerts. Security hauled them as Jenna bellowed rights, Whitney jeering. Steve's circle overwhelmed their bile. Joe Harlan post-event broke probate house equity slim from Susan's refinance payments, unsustainable solo. Listed swift to dodge foreclosure, boxing fits for Section 8 inner city pad 2 beds. Faint ocean echo gone. Bobby nightly touched Steve's pick, waving night-night as I shelved his books, pledging to honor his legacy. Months later, in our new apartment downtown San Diego, the faint hum of city traffic replaced the waves we'd known, but Bobby Gonzalez and I pushed forward step by step. I opened my laptop at the scarred kitchen table one morning while he munched cereal, filling out the community college app with shaking fingers, my personal statement raw about how Steve Gonzalez had pulled me from the rain and shown education as escape, turning a kicked-out pregnant teen into someone worth betting on. The admissions rep called days later, voice catching as she waived fees after reading it twice, linking me to single-parent resources like on-campus daycare subsidies. Bobby's first drop-off tore at me. He clung, screaming arms locked around my neck as the teacher pried gently, his sobs echoing guilt through the parking lot until I dry-heaved outside. But she texted midday he'd calmed building blocks. By week 2, he dashed in, waving bye with a drawn picture clutched tight. My tutoring profile went live on a site soon after, drawing middle schoolers struggling with essays I taught outlines Steve had shown me, while helping at the cafe sessions fitting around classes and Bobby's naps. First payout covered groceries and gas, each dollar a nod we could stand alone. Bobby munched crackers quietly during video calls, learning to play solo as I worked 15 hours weekly. Joe Harlan called with court updates. The restraining order hearing wrapped quick, judge eyeing screenshots of Jenna Ramirez and Whitney Ramirez's posts, plus the bogus HR tip. Their lawyer argued blood rights, but Joe countered with abandonment proof and harassment logs. The gavel dropped on a 3-year ban, violations meaning arrest. Word spread through San Diego circles. Jenna lost her real estate gig when clients bailed over the defamation fallout. Her lies backfiring in a countersuit Joe filed that drained her savings and left her isolated, old friends ghosting after the truth surfaced. Whitney fared worse. Her salon job vanished amid customer complaints, tying her to the smear campaign. Her social feed going silent as community backlash hit neighbors who'd seen Steve's good works turned cold, leaving her holed up and alone in that old beach-adjacent rental. No reconciliation, whispers crept in. I ignored any stray texts or rumors sealing that door forever, their venom a lesson in cutting rot to thrive. Nights Bobby picked Steve's books from our makeshift shelf, curling in my lap as I read in a voice forever off-key from his. We'd stare at the dresser photo, Bobby chattering daycare tales, who shared snacks or pushed swings, waving night-night to Papa. The ache lingered heavy, but so did Steve's echo strength I didn't know I had. Last week in the dim light, sirens wailing distant as Bobby's breaths evened, I felt it. We'd forged ahead, choosing each other daily like Steve taught, turning loss into quiet freedom. That grit built something new from his pieces, proving family isn't forced bonds, but the ones you fight to keep, and in that choice lies real power. For viewers, it's a reminder resilience turns betrayal to boundaries, chosen ties, outlasting blood's breaks, granting space to heal and grow unbound.